Hi, I'm Simon Woodley, co-director of Workshop Architecture, and I'm here to present this project, which is the STEM facility for Spensley Street Primary School. With a small project, success that we believe is its ability to kind of punch above its weight in terms of either scope or budget, to understand what its impact can be in terms of the architectural expansiveness of it, or the outcome of the strategy that it holds. And in this case, we had both of these two things operating in this project that came a long way from when it started. Where it started was in this little boiler room here at the back of the existing 70s buildings. And where it ended up was to extend across this terrace between the boiler room and a BER addition by Angelucci Architects. So this is sort of where we started, with a modest budget to be able to refit this boiler room and the adjacent library space as a new STEM facility for the school. And that's the boiler room there. And where we ended up was being able to connect into this building from above and below and create a new shared STEM and art space above. The reason and the mechanism for doing that was cracks. The terrace leaked. It leaked through to the multi-purpose space below, and the school had cordoned off a reasonable amount of funding for sealing up these cracks to kind of fix the problem that were occurring. And what we suggested to them was that we instead do this, that we roof over it, therefore getting rid of the rain entirely that was causing problems in the leaks below. This excited the school for a number of reasons. One was to create an outdoor learning space between these two buildings, but also because it helped to facilitate a long-term goal they had of creating a STEM and art precinct across these two buildings. And thereby arguing this to the VSBA and to the various quality control people that oversee what we do, we managed to get this idea through, and the funding was combined with an additional small amount of funding to enable this project to proceed. The goodwill that this created ended up allowing us to pursue the architecture, to understand what it would be to kind of connect this and make this new precinct in refreshingly conceptual terms. So we presented things like Go to the Jar, a poem by Wallace Stevens to the school, which is about how an object placed within a landscape can order all that landscape around it. Something that also happens a bit here in a gallery with this displaced wall of Gordon Matter Clark's Bingo. And our displaced wall, which is a sort of this wall kind of drawn out from the existing boiler room space to create an explicit teaching area that is shared between the art precinct, or the art rooms, and also the STEM facility, and kind of create a circulation around this terrace. I'll take you through the plan. So that these rooms here, which are in the existing boiler room, are small group working areas and equipment, things like 3D printers, green screen and other stuff like that. The library space adjacent to it is used for larger group activities, the explicit teaching area discussed, and then on the outside, different areas created within that terrace for small groups, larger groups, informal and formal learning. As always, with sort of ambitious solutions, you end up creating yourself a whole lot of problems, and in this particular case it was how to place a roof between three existing buildings, all built at different times and with different levels, in ways that could comply with the strict VSBA requirements for minimum pitches and thou shalt not use box gutters. That involved also being able to prove to everybody that this thing could indeed stop wind-driven rain from getting onto the terrace. It involved analysing wind patterns and weather patterns. It involved projecting off the geometry of the roof to understand where it fell onto the terrace and therefore adjusting the design accordingly. And a winter spent looking at my veranda to understand just how much overhang was necessary to protect from rain. And 45 degrees pretty much does the trick. It also meant that the roof itself was became the primary architectural element of the project. And in this, we decided that in terms of connecting one building to the other, that it could be quite a simple method of thinking about a structure that started as the kind of rigorous grid of the existing 70s building and started to transform to reflect more about the more playful structural geometries of the BER addition. And that also these structures could be literally and figuratively entwined with one another. So you can see here that the main structural beams that hold up our roof connect also to the existing columns that hold up the roof of the BER. So starting at the back in that gridded space, so you can see here that what we try to do here was emphasise that existing structure. There was a more substantial, more muscular structure in that room because of a concrete slab above that we couldn't afford to demolish. So we sort of took this on and thought, well, okay, let's just use this as a way of intensifying an already existing structure within that building. And this is used to subdivide the various spaces of the rear part of the stem into different areas for small group, but also what was still to come into the building at the time these photographs were taken, the equipment that they used as part of the STEM curriculum. You can see that space in behind here with the group working and now IT zone sitting next to it, and that both of these spaces connect through to the explicit teaching area used for presentations of work and introduction of tasks for the kids, storage, and you can see here its position out on that terrace and the connections it makes visually to the art room and through circulation to those spaces beyond. And then finally here out onto the terrace with informal kind of education areas established out there. And I suppose here also a little word about this structure here. So we went with timber for a couple of reasons. One was to avoid any opportunities for birds to nest underneath the roof, and also because it's the fact that it was cheap enabled us to put in more than we absolutely had to. And by doing that, we could create this sort of idea of the structure reaching out towards the from one side to the other.
1 minute left.
1 minute? Great, thanks. The principal, when talking to us about this project, was saying they wanted it to be like a space that was like no other within the school. And so in drawing together the soffit, the wall and the surface area of this new precinct that we created, we kind of used an in common, in a way, between science and engineering, maths and art, in this case Sol le Witts construction paintings, where the artwork comes as a sort of fracture between method and execution. And the other aspect of these works, particularly this series about that kind of unfolded geometry, we refolded up again to frame entries and to sort of draw the freshness and the dynamism to this space. And I think one of the things that we found quite interesting about the framing in particular was that it was designed in a way to be about sort of fanning out towards, but in many respects almost looks like the cladding is being drawn away, exposing the structural framing underneath, and this kind of dynamic push and pull is something we found really quite satisfying. And in the end, a kind of coherent shared space between science, engineering, art and maths that is unlike any other within the school.